All right, this is Roland Martin's analysis of some of the day two speeches and personalities. I'm not going to give you all of the speeches. I've already done Ben Carson. I'm not going to bore you with all the rest of them. But I thought that this particular clip was pretty interesting as far as their discussion of some of the day two speeches and the personalities involved.
All right, folks, joining me right now from Cleveland to chat about what we've heard thus far. David Swirling, assistant editor, Washington Post. Rhonda Fahmy, she was a Bush appointee serving the Energy Department under President George W. Bush. Also, Jason Johnson with TheRoot.com. All right, folks, day two. Rhonda, how are we still dealing with plagiarizing the speeches? I mean, first it was Melania Trump. Now all of a sudden, now you have Donald Trump Jr. Then you have a conservative writer who says, well, it wasn't plagiarism because I wrote it.
Yeah.
But
he wrote it and he helped with his speech. So it doesn't technically focus on plagiarism. Look, a mistake was made in day one. We certainly admit that. But if plagiarism or charges of plagiarism is all you can come up with, day two, we knocked it out of the park.
Rhonda,
Chris Christie did fabulous. And are you going to compare email scandals and illegal violations of security clearances to mere allegations of plagiarism? Roland?
I tend to agree with you that the night two plagiarism wasn't as egregious as the first night.
Yeah.
It was the speechwriter's words and he acknowledged it.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
you said that we acknowledged the mistake of the first day, but it's not 100% clear.
Nobody did.
Republicans did acknowledge the mistake. And to me, what was egregious, beyond what everybody has already said about the Michelle Obama plagiarism, was that it was plagiarized from Michelle Obama, someone that Republicans repeatedly criticized for 8 years.
Exactly. Look, I got to say this. All of this is an example of us like sucking in the lake effects air of Cleveland, okay? Because how this plays to people on the outside, all they're talking about, the memes are still going. Plagiarism still matters. I agree. I actually thought that Donald Trump Jr. gave the best speech last night. He was better than Christie, didn't put me to sleep like Carson. But the fact of the matter is the people who aren't hardcore partisans, Republicans or Democrats, they're still thinking plagiarism. It still looks like a mess.
And the deal is here. The reality is that's not what you want the public talking about, especially even in social media. I got to do a Ben Carson. Lucifer? Really?
I'm not surprised. It's Ben Carson.
Why are you surprised?
Why are we surprised? I mean, he says these kinds of things all the time. Remember, this is a doctor who didn't know the 4 food groups. This is a doctor who told us that the pyramids were for grain. This is a doctor who couldn't tell us if he stabbed his friend or didn't stab his friend or brought him back from the dead. So nothing that comes out of Ben Carson's mouth surprises me at this point.
There's a weird way in which Dr. Carson and Donald Trump share the same trait. They're both interesting guys who draw attention to themselves, but both not having run for office before, they're learning on the job. And sometimes in these speeches it shows.
Rhonda, could Speaker Paul Ryan possibly do more not to mention Donald Trump in his speech? He sort of reminded me of the Chris Christie speech in 2012 when he never mentioned Mitt Romney.
I know. Well, look, I mean, I think Paul Ryan, we all know he's in a very difficult position. He certainly has a constituency. And, you know, I think what he wanted to do is reassert his position as Speaker. He wants to be elected again. And he was reaching out to Republicans far and wide to do that. You know, he is in a tough position. So he did what he could. He did his best. And to be very honest with you, neither Paul Ryan nor Mitch McConnell nor any one of the sitting Republican senators or, you know, really establishment Republicans were well received at all last night. I mean, people really weren't interested in hearing them. They were interested in hearing the different people, the Chris Christies and others who, you know, aren't part of that typical establishment.
And being from New Jersey, clearly Christie, it was very painful for him not being here as a VP pick.
Yeah, especially when he found out that Melania Trump didn't show up when Donald Trump announced Pence because she wanted her husband to have his own quote-unquote choice, which would have been Christie, but his kids talked him out of Christie and onto Pence.
Oh, no, you know what? That's all rumor. Look, Chris Christie is happy happy in whatever capacity he could serve this particular nominee.
And
And by the way,
Mr.
he's still,
Fetchit.
he's still governor of New Jersey, the great state of New Jersey. He's still doing a great job as the executive.
What's the approval rating there? About 27%?
Look,
Yeah.
He's still running that state. It's not about approval ratings right now. It's about his ability as an executive to run that state.
It's really about approval.
Yeah, Chris Christie couldn't get elected dog catcher now in the state of New Jersey. So for you to say he's doing a great job, that's a bunch of crap. Chris Christie, dog catcher.
No.
This is a guy who won his re-elect with 50% of the Latino
Right.
vote and 20% of the African American vote. That Chris Christie no longer exists.
And now he's known for hostage memes behind Trump. And the issue is, I can't understand why he wouldn't be upset. I think he would actually be a better VP than Mike Pence.
Look, hey, newsflash everyone, watch Chris Christie. If he becomes chief of staff in the Donald Trump administration, he will be the most powerful chief of staff you've seen in a very long time. And more powerful, I'm predicting, than the vice
And
president.
watch the bridges.
And now she's really scaring us to death with Chris Christie as chief of staff. All right, folks, so tight.
All right, so I thought that was pretty good, but Ben Carson, if he would only just ride off into the sunset, disappear, so that we wouldn't have to hear from him again, that would be wonderful.